Welcome back, everybody. We're talking with Brian MacKenzie, noted endurance coach and thinker. One thing I wanted to ask you about is diet. So there's this dogma out there. We think, okay, if I run and do all this endurance activity, I can eat anything that I want because I need to really get pumped up on carbohydrates, especially before a race. So I'd be interested in hearing kind of how would you approach that as an athlete or training an athlete of, okay, you're in this 12-week cycle, and let's say at the end of 12 weeks you have a competition. So take me through week 1 through 11, and then the week before the competition. And then the third part I'd love to hear about is day of competition. I'm always thinking about it when I'm competing in something. I'm not an endurance athlete, but what do I have right before I start? What do I do during? And then how do I manage it thereafter?
First, getting an athlete to understand you have two fueling systems. You've got one, glycogen. That taps out at 2,000 calories. Okay. 2, fat. Typically, that taps out at about 40,000 calories. And this isn't about calories, but I'm using this as an example.
Kind of energy systems.
Energy. So you've got 40,000 kcals of fat, and you've got 2,000 kcals of glycogen.
Right. I think I know where you're going with this one.
Yeah, do you?
What fuel tank is bigger?
Which fuel tank do you think you want to use? And this is a typical athlete, right? We're not talking an overweight person. We get somebody who starts to get mildly overweight or even obese, and you're talking 80,000, maybe 100,000 kcals of fat, right? But yet, here's what happens. You want to store up on glycogen and get that glycogen going and stored. You can. And you can really use that stuff when you're sucking down sugar and when you're sucking down things of high glycemic. And that's the only fuel source you're going to use when using these fuels. When you're burning just fat, you can't be taking in a lot of these high glycemic carbohydrates because that will restrict and retard that process with the insulin response. Okay? So getting the athlete to develop that fat burning system is the primary goal. At least with my athletes and the people we work with.
So you actually have to train your body to actually run on a different kind of fuel? You just can't one day say, okay, I've seen the light, I'm going to stop doing like bombarding myself with carbs and during a race, and I'm just going to live off my fat.
Like Dr. Major and I discussed before, it's your fueling system is just like your other physiological systems. You will need to train this thing.
Yeah, so if you're a diesel engine, you're not going to switch to jet fuel right away.
Nope. But you can take and build this big, robust engine and then dose it with the alcohol-burning fuel of NASCAR or whatever you want on race day, if you like, if that's what you want to do. But developing that through, you've got a 12-week cycle. It's getting the athlete to really learn how to get that body to, and everybody's going to fluctuate. But the fact is that when we start to drop the high glycemic carbs or the fast-reacting carbohydrates, the body has no choice but to start shredding off that fat and becoming more fat burning efficiently.
And in a way, we're regressing back to our primal roots, right?
Absolutely.
Because you didn't have agriculture to go plunder back in the day when you had high physical activity.
Absolutely. And you can as an elite level athlete, and you can even as a novice athlete function off of the carb machine, and it'll work. Yeah, but that's all you're going to function off of. That's all you're going to. And sure, you might think you look great or you're skinny, but what's really going on inside is probably something different, and that's actually what we're finding out. I mean, between the two of us, what you're finding out within WellnessFX and what we've been finding out in this is that these athletes aren't really as healthy as they seem to think they have been.
Well, and that's the other thing. It's interesting. You look at somebody on the outside, and at WellnessFX we test people, and what we see is we'll get some phenomenal athletes in here, and you look at them, and you're like, wow, they look amazing. There must be a lot of good things going on, and crack the hood open. There's a lot of people who have messy biomarkers, and you're kind of going, wow. And you say, so you immediately start having all these questions, and it all goes back to diet. What do you really eat in your quiet 10 o'clock at night before you go to bed when nobody can see?
I'm crushing down some ice cream, or I'm doing the, how many of us are guilty of that? A lot of us, most of us, but how often is that happening, and what is the end result of that? And that's where we're seeing, especially with a lot of these endurance athletes, where they are showing signs of type 2 diabetes, like even prior to, like,
right.
I mean, even as athletes, like they've got this biomarker that is showing this problem, and hey, you are probably susceptible.
Which defies expectations, right?
Absolutely.
You would think, based on dogma and whatnot.
Absolutely.
What do you think of the Western States winner this year, who was the guy who basically did a paleo diet, and
yeah, he was low carb, and he he
so he's running on a fuel, that's a fuel system difference, right?
Absolutely.
He quickly went through his 2,000.
If that be what happened, yeah. And I mean, that's what I've heard, and I've also heard that he's not real open to discussing what he does, which maybe that's his
secret sauce,
because that was Erin's secret sauce, is not explaining everybody what she's doing.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard, he was really low carb paleo, and he was just a fat incinerating machine.
Well, and also he apparently didn't have dietary distress, which is kind of an issue during race, I think, for people who eat a lot of carbs.
A lot of people.
Yeah.
Most people. That is what you see in an endurance event.
So why? What is it about the carbs that causes dietary distress?
A lot of it's the osmolality of putting in all these different polymers of, of these different carbohydrates. So you hit an aid station at mile 1 or mile 5, right? And there's an aid station usually every mile in a marathon. But you take something like an ultra marathon.
So it upsets the dietary lining and it's inflammatory.
Absolutely. And the pyloric valve just shuts down. Says, "Whoa, I don't know what's going on here. I don't know how many of these things you're going to shove in me that are different, and I don't know what to do with it."
Right.
And all of a sudden I've got sloshy gut, and then I'm throwing up. And I've been there. I know a lot of people who've been there, and it's typical of what happens within these events. Very, very typical. It's just not it's just contrary to what we've been taught, and everybody just kind of fed off of that machine, because it's something you actually need. And I mean, sure, here's the irony in the whole thing, is that once you start with the sugars, once you start with the gels, once you start with all that, you can't stop doing it, doing an event, because your system is now shut off to using that fat system, and now it's just using that 2,000 calorie system, right? And how much have you depleted out of that system already, which is why you're going to just need to continue to take that stuff in as an immediate fuel. And how efficiently or how robust is that system in order to take that? Because if you've been on a high carb diet, that system is not robust. It has not been built. You've been using the quick fix.
Yeah. I mean, so take me to competition day, or let's say night before. What do you have? I mean, so traditionally night before, I'm gonna eat a shit
pasta, and pizza or whatever.
And I can go crazy.
Yeah. Nothing changes.
And maybe you can. I mean,
maybe you can, but for my athletes and for myself, nothing changes. It all stays the same. Stays the same. And if during competition or during a race, there's always that option of taking the gel or something that is a quick fuel, but the understanding is always there of, if I start, I cannot stop. And that's just how it has to go. And
even during race day, and you've been paleo the whole time, and it's kind of a one-time shot. The instant you do that, it doesn't make it harder to switch back to the fat system.
Yeah, it still makes it difficult to switch back. Yeah, it's very difficult.
So even if you're trained up,
you could expect to walk or even have to stop if you stop using the gels. That is what will happen. But typically, if you've got some sort of ultra event or something, you'd save something for like that towards the end of the race. Or if you've got some short duration event, like a 10K or something like that, you could probably pop something right before you go, and you're going to have, boom, an immediate fuel source, and you're not going to burn out of it, and that's all you're going to have to use. But afterwards, pay attention.
So just to inject my own personal agenda here, what if you're doing a competition of 4 CrossFit WODs in a day, and it's right before the first one of the day?
Yeah.
Stay with your diet?
Yeah.
So don't do
I just went over this with one of the swim teams we work with extensively, and the girls are talking about caffeine and when to use the sugar, when to use the gels and things like that. And they've got a 4-day competition or 3-day competition, and it's like they're swimming at multiple events in a day. They're doing these things, something typical of the CrossFit Games. It is an inevitable recipe for disaster to be sucking down sugar in things like multiple day events like that.
So stay off of it.
Absolutely.
So things like 3 Fuel.
Absolutely. That's why
shaker drinks.
Absolutely. Something with resistant starches in it, medium chain fats, high quality proteins, exactly like what 3 Fuel is, but sticking to things that aren't going to shred just throw those insulin levels off. Because once you throw that off, you've got to stay on it. And then if you're competing throughout the day, your energy cycle's just up and down and up and down. And up and down.
Yeah. Cool stuff. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.